China must address bilateral issues in a sustainable way. This is the Hindu editorial of yesterday and Times of India editorial of today, and they talk about the relations between India and China. You have to look at the visit of our Prime Minister to China from two perspectives. One perspective is BRICS summit, second perspective is one-to-one discussion between Xi Jinping and Narendra Modi. So, these two aspects we are going to deliberate, and BRICS summit saw the convergence of India and China on international terrorism, and it also set the stage for forward looking engagements. These forward looking engagements are quite evident when you look at the one-to-one talks between Narendra Modi and Xi Jinping, and this convergence of India and China on international terrorism is evident when two of the terror groups from Pakistan are included. Specifically, these two terror groups are concerning the problematic as far as, or you can say these two terror groups are believed to be the operations from Pakistani land to destabilize India. So, this assumed significance from these two perspectives. For the first time, I am talking about Xiamen declaration. Three aspects are there. One is BRICS nations named Pakistan based terror groups, and out of these terror groups, two organizations are important as far as India is concerned. One is Lashkar-e-Toiba, Jaish-e-Mohammed. So, the Xiamen declaration, the success lies in including the terror groups operating from Pakistan and believed to be destabilizing India from across the border. So, that is the biggest achievement. Then how to infer this? It has got lot of inference. This assumed significance because China consistently blocked New Delhi's attempt to get the United Nations sanctions against Jaish-e-Mohammed chief Maulana Masood Azhar for the past 1 or 2 years. So, it is a big gain for the Prime Minister who succeeded at the BRICS meeting in the port city of Xiamen, because this could not be included in the Goa declaration last year. In the last year October, Goa summit was held, and now this BRICS summit is the 9th summit. Now, India became successful for inclusion of these two terror groups, and here this agreement is a tactical concession given by China, and it came about largely because other BRICS nations insisted that as far as terror groups are concerned, all must be included. There should not be good terrorism, there should not be bad terrorism. So, this assumed more significance for India because LET and JEM continue to attack targets in India from their safe bases in Pakistan. And if you look at the other aspects of this BRICS leaders, or you can say this Xiamen declaration, that is condemning terror by indicating or including various terror groups, that is the first aspect. Second aspect is BRICS countries together committed to an open and inclusive multilateral trading system. So, multilateral trading system, that means now because of Donald Trump, because of the statements of Donald Trump, now the globalization is facing some problems, or you can say is facing some headwinds. So, under these circumstances, this open and inclusive multilateral trading system, that means the commitment from BRICS assumed second significance. Then the third issue is all the countries are united in North Korean issue. Somewhat China is soft towards North Korea, but all the 5 countries condemned unequivocally the solution to North Korean issue through advocating dialogue, but not by the use of force. So, it gives message to America. These two issues gives clear message to America. The issue of North Korea is to be solved with negotiations. That is the first point. The second point is we are here for inclusive multilateral trading system, right. Then outcome of the bilateral visit, or you can say outcome of one-to-one meeting between Narendra Modi and Xi Jinping. We have discussed about Xiamen declaration fallout, and now we are discussing about the outcome of 1 hour meeting between Narendra Modi and Xi Jinping beyond Doklam. So, the most positive aspect is both the nations now agreed for looking beyond Doklam. So, India and China decided to open a new forward looking round of engagement, and during one-to-one meeting it was decided that there must be new ways to prevent the recurrence of Doklam such incidents. That means, Doklam incidents should not recur, and more should be on confidence building measures of the border. So, the border issue is to be put on track with possible ties, or you can say confidence building measures as far as the border is concerned, that must be put on track. So, the BRICS summit saw the convergence between India and China, as we have already discussed, on international terrorism, and now India and China, as far as the one-to-one discussion is concerned, they are looking for new mechanisms to strengthen border defense agreements, right. So, what are the diplomatic achievements for India in a nutshell, if you combine not only BRICS declaration, but also one-to-one meeting? Forward looking round of engagement anchored by fresh mechanisms to reduce the tensions of the border disputes, fresh mechanism and forward looking engagement, that is the first fallout. Then second is categorical statements that Doklam must not recur. Third third one is China's nod for inclusion of Lashkar-e-Toiba and this Jaish-e-Mohammed among the terrorist groups. At the same time, it is also a diplomatic victory for India, because the contentious Belt and Road initiative was not spoken at the summit. Some people expected that in the joint declaration this Belt and Road initiative will be brought by China, but somehow it is the diplomatic victory for India, because China could not bring this contentious Belt and Road initiative at the summit. So, China must avoid this Thucydides trap. What is this meaning of this? That means, this word probably many of you might not have heard it. In the Times of India editorial, it was mentioned that China must avoid Thucydides trap. What is the meaning of this Thucydides trap? It is the situation when a rising power causes fear in an established power. Here you see, if you look at China and America, America is established power and China is rising power. Several times China tells that America should avoid this trap. Similarly, this also applies to India. So, Times of India editorial says that China constantly cautions US to avoid this Thucydides trap, and the same caution applies to China in its relationship with India, right. So, this is one important word, please do not forget. And at the same time, as per Times of India, China has facing several problems, stiff political resistance in many foreign countries. Chinese exports face stiff political resistance in several foreign countries. Indian market has become important for China. So, under these circumstances, for mutual benefit, both the countries must work together so as to usher in an Asian century. So, it is pointless to blame one on the other. That is as per Times of India. So, finally, what is the need of the hour? The need of the hour is Indian and Chinese officials must re-engage in a sustained manner to address all the areas of discord. They must look at the standard operating procedures with regard to border defense. They must convene the meeting of the special representatives with the claims and counterclaims included in the meeting, and the language used with regard to Lashkar-e-Toiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed must be established into a real true letter and spirit. It will be evident in October when the issue of designating Jaish-e-Mohammed chief Masood Azhar as a global terrorist comes up at the United Nations Security Council. All said and done, there will certainly be several irritants. One is this CPEC passing through Jammu and Kashmir. How to solve this? Already the construction started. So, this is going to be the bigger irritant. And Arunachal Pradesh issue, unless China recognizes Arunachal Pradesh as part and parcel of India, then I think the relations will continue to be strained in the near future also. With the optimistic note, let us wind up this discussion, right. Mountains of garbage. This is the Hindu editorial of today. This editorial argues Swachh Bharat is basically concentrating on keeping the surroundings clean, but not much could be achieved as far as solid waste management is concerned. The question here is, in spite of achievements of Swachh Bharat, solid waste management continues to be the area of concern critically examined. You see, there was a collapse of Great Wall of Garbage in East Delhi's Ghazipur area, and it swept cars and vehicles into the nearby canal. So, you see the irony, the garbage wall collapsed, and under these circumstances almost more than 1 year ago, solid waste management rules 2016 were given out by the government. But what is done during the past 1.5 years? Literally nothing across the country. This remained on paper. So, to answer such type of question, please recollect the rules given by the central government and subsequently apply them, that this is not done, this is not done. So, the need of the hour is to do all these things. So, it is very simple to answer such type of question. So, here a lot more needs to be done in solid waste management rules. The basic need of the hour is to implement in toto solid waste management rules. Here they are applicable beyond municipal areas also. Here segregation of waste at source is mandated, and the concept is recovery, reuse and recycle, 3 R's. This is the excellent concept as far as the waste is concerned, but unfortunately in our country implementation is the problem. Generators of waste, if I am generating the waste, I have to segregate it into wet, dry and hazardous. Wet waste, dry waste, hazardous waste. There are different ways of managing each and every waste. Then integration of rag pickers and waste dealers into the formal system. Now most of this waste is collected by rag pickers, waste dealers, and unscientific way of processing is going on. Some places recycling is going on. It is totally haphazard and it is not managed by any of the organization. So, in a haphazard way, some sort of recycling, some sort of energy generation, some sort of dumping it somewhere, all these things are taking place. But strictly speaking, there is no organized system developed in our country for the waste disposal, and that is the need of the hour. So, here lot many things are there, like a spot fine is to be imposed, user fee is to be imposed, generator has to pay user fee to the waste collector, and a spot fine for non-segregation and littering, and responsibility is kept on resident welfare associations like that. The developers of SEZs, industrial estates should earmark at least 5% of total area for recycling and recovery. Beautiful rules, but nowhere they are implemented in our country. That is the biggest irony. And you see, 3 African countries, you have to learn a lot from them. Banning of plastics. All of you are familiar with Rwanda. It suffered because of civil war, but it banned plastic bags few years ago. Look at Kenya. Kenya imposed ban a few days ago. The penalty is $40,000 or 4 years in jail. If you look at Morocco, this banned plastic for the past 10 years or so as per the news reports. So, you have to learn a lot from these African countries. Of course, I slightly deviated. Now, we are talking about plastic disposal, please do not forget. Then, what is the present status of solid waste management? These rules were notified almost 1 year ago, and various cities and towns are not in a position to comply with these stipulations. Now, the total waste generated is 62 million tons annually, and now the system is left to informal garbage collectors and recyclers, as I have already explained. It is totally done in an informal way. Then, more on waste management. As we have seen, Swachh Bharat is concentrated on individual action to keep various surroundings clean, but it could not put concurrent pressure on state and municipal authorities to move closer to the management of garbage scientifically. Interesting point here is, from 62 million tons, the garbage is going to grow up to 165 million tons by 2030. So, the urban areas are highly threatened now because of this garbage accumulation. Then the nodal body for the implementation of new rules is the Central Pollution Control Board should put out periodic assessment of preparedness of urban local bodies. The national record is collection is 80%, but the processing is just 28%. Then waste has got lot many opportunities. We are not able to utilize the opportunities of waste. Organic refuse out of the total garbage, we are talking about total garbage, and we have seen that it is to be segregated into dry, wet as well as the third. So, it is to be segregated, and after segregation this organic refuse forms 50%. So, this 50% of organic waste has got a lot of potential for energy generation. That is most important point. It can be used for the generation of compost, at the same time production of methane for household use or for power generation. Cooking can be done by using this energy from the waste. The opportunity of organic waste that could help green the cities and feed small and affordable household biogas plants. So, biogas plants can be run with this organic waste. The segregation of waste into wet, dry, hazardous, that is to be undertaken, and properly this is to be implemented so as to derive the benefit from organic waste. Then the need of the hour is bulk waste generators should take the lead, and urban bodies should demonstrate change in the way it is processed. There should be shift away from large budgets for collection, and the processing of this segregated garbage must be given the top priority, because organic waste can generate lot of energy, and recycling, reuse, all these things can be thought of for other forms of waste. A paradigm shift is required in managing the waste of the country. Right friends, a thought provoking editorial. Now, two editorials I have taken from Hindu and Times of India. These pertain to the murder of senior journalist and editor Gauri Lankesh in Bengaluru. She was shot dead outside her home in Bengaluru. So, this casts a shadow on the freedom of speech in our country. She is known for her left wing views. At the same time, she is known critic of Hindutva. She is the publisher and editor of Kannada Weekly, Gauri Lankesh Patrike. She came up against the establishment in multiple ways. She took up the cause of Dalits and farmers. At the same time, she sought to bring Naxalites into the mainstream. You see, several rationalists as well as several journalists are being murdered in recent times. The recent memory goes to M. Kalburgi, Govind Pansare, Narendra Dabholkar, and now Gauri Lankesh and Safdar Hashmi long ago. And the need of the hour in a democratic country, what is the need of the hour in a democratic country? People should have the freedom to articulate their views. Then freedom of the press must become integral part of this. Then unfortunately, as far as freedom of press is concerned, as per the report or index given by Reporters Without Borders, India's rank is 136. In fact, it is slipped by 3 places last year. In comparison to last year, this year it slipped by 3 places, came down from 133 to 136. We talk a lot about Pakistan, but still it is just 3 places above Pakistan. So, this indicates a lot more needs to be done as far as freedom of speech in our country is concerned. Then greatest economic asset is free speech. In fact, in the words of Raghuram Rajan, India's tradition of free speech and tolerance is the greatest economic asset. If tolerance, free speech, if both are not there, then ultimately it casts a shadow on the economy also. Then yesterday the Supreme Court issued instructions to the center as well as the states to crack down on the cow vigilant groups who take the law into their own hands. It indicates that law enforcing authorities should only act in cases when something, the law of the land is violated. Taking the law into the private people, it will have adverse consequences. One such example is present murder of the journalist and this cow vigilant groups. So, like that, it assumed significance in the global context. In fact, globally now what is rewarded? What is rewarded is, one is innovation is rewarded, second one is human capital is rewarded, and the soft power is rewarded. So, these are the important aspects. So, under the circumstances, tolerance, free speech, these assumed a lot of significance. Then the next lead article of the Hindu, testing times in the Korean Peninsula. We are going to discuss once again about North Korea, because this gave in detail. So, I would not like you to bore with this, because we discussed previously about North Korea number of times. I would like to go a little fast. Examine the circumstances. We discussed 2 days ago. A.Q. Khan from Pakistan, he transferred technology to the North Korea, and subsequently North Korea gave missile technology to Pakistan. It mutually benefited both the countries. We discussed about it in the last discussion. Now, we are going to elaborate from different perspective. Examine the circumstances which led to the development of nuclear and missile program of North Korea, and this is normal thing. And one more important aspect is, some countries feel that becoming a nuclear power, some countries feel that becoming nuclear power is an insurance than madness. Normally, we feel that why North Korea is doing all those things, we feel that it is the madness of Kim Jong-un, but there is some valid reason behind it. The country feels that it is an insurance against attacks. So, the countries having nuclear power cannot easily be attacked, that is the impression in North Korea, and there are several examples to support that view we are going to discuss today. And the first one is North Korea. This is map. Then subsequently, important information from the nuclear tests we discussed in the previous lectures. An explosive yield of approximately 120 kilotons. It is 6 times bigger than Hiroshima bomb, and at the same time, as per the reports, that it also developed a miniaturized warhead that could be made into its missiles. So, a small nuclear warhead can be fitted into the missiles, intercontinental ballistic missiles, and that can be thrown at the other country. That means the suspicion is North Korea mastered both the technologies, small nuclear warhead which can be fitted into intercontinental ballistic missiles, then acceleration of nuclear and missile programs under Kim Jong-un. So, here in fact, both the nuclear program as well as the missile program, both are in fact accelerated during the supreme leader Kim Jong-un's time in comparison to the previous regime, and he is quite fearing about his regime. That may be one reason. He is fearing about his regime, or you can say existential threat, what you call. So, he is fearing about his existence, you can say, or you can say existential threat he is facing. And second important point is having the nuclear weapons is an insurance against attacks by superpowers. So, that is the impression, or you can say that is in the minds of Kim Jong-un, right. So, he accelerated the nuclear program in recent times, and we discussed about Hwasong 14 last week. This is intercontinental ballistic missile, but here the range is given differently in this article. In the previous article, we discussed, the author stated that the range may be around 9,000 to 10,000 kilometers, but in this it is given as 6,500 kilometers, because these are all unconfirmed reports. Then if you come back from 1953 Armistice Agreement and subsequent developments after the Korean Civil War from 1950 to 1953, Armistice Agreement in 1953 was signed by North Korea, China and the United States of America, representing the United Nations Command. It is to be followed by peace treaty, but it never happened. South Korea and North Korea do not recognize each other. North Korea considers South under US occupation, whereas South Korea considers the entire peninsula as its territory. However, in 1991, both the Koreas were admitted to the United Nations. China, looking for investment and technology, recognized South Korea in 1992 much against the wishes of North Korea, and subsequent developments of honeymoon between China and North Korea we discussed number of times, because now North Korea is dependent on China, but China started good relationship with South Korea in 1992, probably with an eye on investments and technology. Subsequently, North Korea and developments since 1990s. Here, since 1990, or you can say since 1990s, that was the period end of Cold War, Soviet Union was broken down. So, subsequently, the key priorities for North Korea were regime acceptance and regime survival. So, because of that threat as felt by the supreme leaders, they are going aggressively with the nuclear program. So, these are the developments. In 1992, a positive move was the withdrawal of tactical nuclear weapons from Korean Peninsula, and subsequently the joint US South Korean military exercises were suspended, but subsequently joint exercises were resumed, and North Korea announced its decision to withdraw from nuclear non-proliferation treaty, but North Korea was persuaded to suspend its decision to withdraw from NPT, and subsequently for 4 or 5 years some sort of honeymoon prevailed between North Korea and Clinton administration. You see, 1995 to 2000, $800 million of humanitarian assistance was given to North Korea by the Clinton administration, but everything changed with Bush. When Bush became the president, he declared North Korea as part of axis of evil in 2002. Subsequently, everything went wrong. Off and on talks were held, but ultimately from 2006, North Korea is in the process of developing its nuclear weapons on full-fledged basis. In fact, it responded, that means after the six-party talks in 2003, which led to the 2005 joint statement, which expanded the scope to more than the nuclear issue, but the talks collapsed and US imposed sanctions. Subsequent to US sanctions, North Korea responded with its first nuclear test in 2006. So, subsequently the journey of nuclear weapons continued unabated. Both missile program as well as this nuclear tests accelerated under Kim Jong-un, because Kim Jong-un is fearing about the stability of the government, or you can say regime acceptance and regime survival. These two are totally the threats as felt by the supreme leader in North Korea. Right, friends? Another important point what we raised, nuclear weapons, is it an insurance or madness? There are three glaring examples in recent times. So, you can say from these examples, North Korea is treating nuclear weapons and a missile program as its insurance. So, North Korea is treating it as insurance, but not madness as felt by the world community. You see three glaring incidents in recent times. The first one is in 2003, this Muammar Gaddafi, he gave up his nuclear ambitions in return for diplomatic normalization. But what happened subsequently? Finally, he was shot dead by rebels backed by his Western allies. So, here a lesson learnt from this incident by North Korea is, if North Korea develops nuclear weapons as well as missile program, it will act as insurance against the Western attacks. Then Saddam Hussein has given up his own weapons of mass destruction program and met the similar fate in 2006. Then the third point is this Ukraine gave up the nuclear weapons in 1994 after receiving security guarantee from US, UK and Russia. But what happened? All is history. Crimea, a portion of Ukraine, was annexed by Russia. Had Ukraine developed nuclear weapons, then probably Russia might not have annexed Crimea from Ukraine. That is the important point to note. So, here the important point is nuclear weapons are acting as insurance, and people feel that it is madness, but more than madness, they are acting as insurance against the attacks by Western powers, as the recent examples of the past 20 years show. Right, what is the way out finally? People are talking about denuclearization as well as reunification of Koreas, but they have to be set aside for the first. That means there is a suspicion, almost a clear suspicion, that North Korea developed nuclear capability. It is almost a reality. So, the world community has to accept it. Previously, people are talking about denuclearization, at the same time reunification of Koreas, but there is no more people can talk about denuclearization, because North Korea has gone much beyond that. So, North Korea's nuclear capability is accepted. Mutual recognition have to precede reunification. That means mutual recognition of North Korea and South Korea has to be the first step, because I have already told you North Korea does not recognize South, similarly South does not recognize North. So, the two Koreas need to begin a dialogue in due course, and managing this requires closer understanding between US and South Korea also. In fact, North feels US is behind South Korea, and the exact relationship between US and South Korea must also be understood, right friends. So, the need of the hour is to go for peace process. For Mr. Kim, the stakes are existential, as we have already seen, regime survival and parallel negotiations on political and nuclear tracks are needed if the current crisis is to be averted. Right. The last one, development must be climate smart, very important article. Critically examine the relation between the anthropogenic activities. What is the meaning of anthropogenic? That means human induced activities because of human development, you can say. Anthropogenic activities, because of humans, lot of destruction is taking place in the environment because of anthropogenic activities. Extreme events like droughts, rainfall patterns, hurricanes, these are all happening, and critically examine the relation between the destruction of environment and extreme events. Are they related or not? You have to throw some light on this. Here you see there were devastated floods in parts of Mumbai, Chandigarh and Mount Abu in recent times, and if you look at America, Hurricane Harvey's rampage through Houston in USA was also observed. Mumbai received 400 millimeters of rainfall within 12 hours. Houston received 1300 millimeters over several days with Hurricane Harvey. So, these things are recent examples, and now climate change and increase in extreme rainfall events. Nowadays, the world is facing extreme droughts, extreme rainfalls, extreme floods. Is it something to do with anthropogenic activities or not, or is it a natural phenomena? That is the question which we are going to answer. According to IPCC special report, global warming leads to changes in the frequency, intensity, spatial extent, duration and the timing of extreme weather and climate events. So, the duration and the timing of extreme weather and climate events, they are affected because of global warming. So, the point to note here is because of climate change, here extreme rainfall events are taking place. So, climate change already happened. Because of climate change, or you can say because of global warming, extreme events are taking place, right. The average monsoon rainfall is expected to increase initially and then reduce after a few decades. We are talking about, as per IITM Pune report, there has been a significant increase in the magnitude and frequency of extreme rainfall events. Here the days, or you can say the number of moderate events are reduced. We are looking at central India, the number of moderate events are reduced, but there is increase in the magnitude and frequency of extreme events. This is important point to note. So, these changes interacting with the land use patterns. What is the meaning of this? Land use patterns means we are constructing houses in the flood prone areas, we are blocking the natural water flows, we are not allowing the rivers to flow. So, because of the changes in land use pattern, because of the change in rainfall pattern, because of these two things, floods are becoming the nightmare in cities like Chennai, Mumbai, whatever city you take, right. Then is there any relation between anthropogenic climate change and extreme events? Here climate change is happening because of global warming and destruction of other activities, that is there, but is there any relation between these anthropogenic climate change and extreme events? According to much of the literature, it is easier to determine attribution. What is the meaning of attribution? Attribution means the relationship between anthropogenic climate change and extreme events. So, this entire article we are discussing about, is there any relation between anthropogenic climate change and the incidence of extreme events, because we are seeing many extreme events in recent times. NASA scientists stated that Texas heat wave of 2011 and Russian heat wave of 2010 were due to climate change. So, there is a relation between climate change as well as the extreme events like extreme heat wave, extreme rainfall, all these things. According to a paper, 494 millimeters of rainfall in Chennai was a rare event and less than a 0.2% chance of occurring in any given year. So, the Chennai floods of 2015 did not have a clear climate signature as per the article, but there is one other element, land use element. Why the Chennai floods compounded? The reason being the land use pattern. So, as far as Chennai floods are concerned, rainfall is one aspect. Second one is because of the anthropogenic activities of land use, this Chennai floods were in fact the intensity got increased. One way to look at it is extreme rainfall. Second point to look at it is, even though extreme rainfall is there, why floods are happening? Because we blocked the natural water channels. Then what about Hurricane Harvey? Here you see Hurricane Harvey, excessive rainfall is also linked to the climate change. As per the news report, higher sea surface temperatures as well as blocking region of high pressure that kept the rain clouds over Houston for a long period, and it resulted in 1300 millimeters of rainfall. In fact, this higher sea temperatures and region of high pressure that has not allowed the clouds to go away. Clouds were there for longer duration. This is also due to climate change. So, climate change is undoubtedly causing extreme events like heat waves, like extreme days of rainfall, and this is compounded because of our land use pattern. So, these three things please do not forget. If you look at the pattern of flooding, that is due to human induced activities, I have already told you. One such thing is natural increase in built up area. In this article, you have to view from two perspectives. One is the perspectives like heat waves, extreme rainfalls, they are all together, or you can say they are linked with the climate change, and the events like flooding is happening because of one more reason. The reason is the land use pattern in urban areas. We destroyed natural drainage channels. The diversion of damming of rivers upstream is leading to sediment transport and siltation, because of which water level is rising. Then spread of infrastructure like roads, highways, buildings, that is not allowing the water to percolate into the soil. Similarly, there are further barriers that block movement of water and increase the flooding. We are destroying natural water channels, at the same time we are destroying natural water bodies. That is the point to note. So, here two things are there: climate change related rainfall events as well as climate change related heat waves, and because of climate change related rainfall, extreme rainfall events, the problem is compounded in urban areas because of the improper land use pattern in urban areas. So, pitfalls of urban growth. Urban growth over the past few decades ignored the hydrology of the land. If you take for example Chennai, systematic intrusion into Pallikaranai wetlands In fact, in Pallikaranai wetlands, lot of constructions came up and other wetlands by housing complexes, multi-story complexes, commercial buildings came up. For example, if you take in Chennai, that is in Pallikaranai lake, or you can say Pallikaranai wetlands. So, as well as slums came up around Kuvam river as well as Adayar river. So, these problems in fact compounded the overall problem. Large scale construction along the coast are classic examples of encroachment of the built environment that obstruct natural water channels, right. So, why the development needs to be climate smart? The development must be climate smart. In a nutshell, because of climate change, you cannot prevent the days of excessive rainfall, you cannot prevent the days of heat wave, but what you can prevent is the infrastructure which you are developing that must be made climate smart. That means it should be in a position to withstand heat wave conditions. Example is green buildings. At the same time, it must be in a position to take the risk of floods. That means they must be the hydrology of the area or contours of the area must be taken into consideration before giving approvals for buildings as well as commercial structures. So, these are to be integrated. Then those who are the most vulnerable and the poorest, they will end up bearing the brunt of burdens of climate change. So, the article is very clear, there is a relation between climate change and the extreme events. What we can do is we can reduce the damage to the minimum extent as possible by undertaking various aspects like looking at the contours, looking at the areas which have got prior water bodies as well as water channels should